Hi, welcome to Elizabeth Reads. We are now on chapter 10 of A Place Called Perfect. An urgent meeting. Her mother was back by the time Violet returned home that evening. Rose was full of the joys of Perfect. She just couldn't stop describing Mrs. Bickery's apple pie. The best I've ever tasted, Violet. I'll make it for dessert. June gave me the recipe. It's a family secret, but she said she would share it with me. Everybody is so nice in this town. Violet nodded as she took out her school books. Oh, good. Her mother smiled. The pills are working already. I've never seen you so eager to study, dear. Violet didn't answer. She wasn't any more or less eager to study than she had been before, but she hoped that by keeping her mother happy, she might not have to take any more pills. Here, dear, her mother said, dropping 2 yellow capsules onto the table. Time for your medication. But ma'am, please, I'm fine on the one you gave me earlier. I love Perfect. She forced a polite smile. That's great, Violet. I'm delighted, but it won't help your IDDCS. You do want to be cured, don't you, dear? Can we please wait for Dad to come home? Okay, but you'll take them then. Your dad agrees with me. We both want you to be rid of this syndrome. It's holding you back. Think of how much you could achieve without it. Violet smiled again and turned to her books, pretending to study, while Rose whistled as she prepared the risotto and apple pie. Violet had never even heard of risotto before Perfect. Now it was her mother's specialty. It was after 6, and her dad had not returned from work. He never missed dinner. In all the years he'd been her father, and that was all her life, he'd never spent an evening away without telling them. She glanced up at the clock as her mother set the table. We can't wait any longer, Violet dear, her mother sighed. My apple pie will go soggy. But what about Dad? Don't worry about your father. I'll save him some dessert. I'm not worried about your pie, ma'am. Where is Dad? It's not like him to come home late. What if something's happened? In Perfect, Violet? Her mother laughed. Of course nothing has happened to him. He's just caught up in his work, I imagine. He has the best job in the world, working with the Archer brothers. But, ma'am, Violet pleaded, I thought you didn't like the Archers. The first night we came here, you said they gave you the— Violet, Rose snapped. Stop being so disruptive. I know it's a syndrome, dear, but it is getting out of hand. I have never, nor will I ever, speak badly of the Archers. Rose picked up the 2 yellow capsules and handed them to Violet. She looked at the pills and then back at her mother. Now, her mother ordered. Slowly, she placed the yellow capsules under her tongue. Her mother filled a glass with water and handed it to Violet. Swallow, she barked. Violet did as she was told. Rose smiled and carried on dishing out the dinner. When her back was turned, Violet quickly spat out the pills from under her tongue and shoved them in her pocket. Now, her mother said a little later as they were tucking into the risotto, I bet you feel better already. Violet nodded and didn't look up from her plate. If she spoke, she wouldn't be able to hide the teary tremble in her voice. Oblivious, her mom chatted about her day right through dinner and dessert. The meal was rounded off with the obligatory cup of tea, but Violet remembered the old woman's warning earlier that day and couldn't quite bring herself to drink it. Later that night, her father still hadn't returned, and Violet's stomach churned. She felt sick thinking about her visit to the Archer's Emporium. She definitely heard her father's voice. Why hadn't she questioned the Archers more? Why had she walked away? Something was wrong. She knew it. Her dad was in some sort of trouble. Guilt hung over her as she climbed the stairs to bed. Just as she reached the top step, the phone rang. She paused. Moving closer to the banister, she sat down and listened. Hello, the Brown household, her mother said in her new posh phone voice. Oh, Mr. Archer, how may I help you? Yes, I thought as much. Violet was worried. She was? Oh, really? She didn't tell me that. I'm so sorry if she upset you, Mr. Archer. I'm afraid it must be the IDDCS. Yes, she's taking the pills. I watched her myself this evening. Oh, of course, Mr. Archer. I know how children can be. I'll stand over her next time. Thank you for letting me know about Eugene, Mr. Archer. I hope he's helping your research. That's great to hear. How long will he be away? Oh, perfect. Yes, I'll tell her. Good night, Mr. Archer. Why had the Archers rung to tell them her dad was away? Surely her dad could pick up the phone. Why couldn't he ring them himself? Violet, her mother snapped, spying her on the stairs. Were you eavesdropping? Oh, no, I just wanted to hear if it was Dad. It was Edward Archer, her mother smiled. Your father's going to be away for a few days. He's gone to an optician's conference. Very important, apparently. Why couldn't he tell us himself? Violet said, her voice louder than she'd intended. He didn't even pack a bag. Violet, please, you're giving me a headache. It was very kind of Edward Archer to ring and let us know. Your father had to leave quickly. It was urgent. An urgent opticians conference? Violet, your condition is really getting the better of you. It's exhausting, dear. Edward Archer was kind enough to inquire after your health. Everyone in this town is being so helpful, and you repay them by being ungrateful. What were you doing in the Archer's Emporium today? I was looking for Dad, Violet snapped. You were snooping around in places you shouldn't be. It's lucky Edward Archer has promised not to take it any further. Any further? Violet protested. But I didn't. Violet, her mother sighed. Enough is enough. Just be glad the Archers are so understanding. I'm sure your dad won't be when he comes home. Violet didn't respond. There was no point. No matter what she said, it was bound to get twisted. She stood up, turned, and walked down the carpeted hallway to her room, closed the door, and collapsed on her bed. Her world was crashing down around her. Her mother wouldn't listen, and her father had disappeared. She'd been more than mean to him over the last few weeks, and now she might never see him again. The Archers were behind all the weirdness, she was sure. But even if she could prove it, no one would listen. It was as if everyone in Perfect was under a spell. Her eyes welled up. She couldn't hold back the tears, and she cried until she had nothing left. Exhausted, she crawled beneath her duvet and hoped that sleep would find her. It didn't. That night, no matter what she did, Violet just couldn't get comfortable. There was a strange lump in her bed. After hours of tossing and turning, she put on her glasses and got up to investigate. She patted down the sheets, but the lump was still there. And then she pulled them back a little and checked underneath in case something had got trapped when her mother was making the bed. There was nothing. It was as if the lump was actually inside the mattress. Maybe a spring had come loose or something. In her frustration, Violet pulled the sheets right off the bed and inspected closer. Bits of fluff poked out from a thin tear that ran along the top of the mattress. It was about the length of her arm from her elbow to her wrist. She wiggled her fingers through until they brushed against something solid. Squeezing her hand further inside, she clasped the mysterious object and pulled it from its hiding place. That's the end. Join me next time for the next chapter in A Place Called Perfect.